Airflow is hard, I don't know where to start, I don't know what is an operator, what is a DAG, how can I run my first data pipeline? I have so many questions. Well, you know, I was exactly like you many years ago, and in this video, you are going to learn how to create your first data pipeline in Airflow 3.0. My name is Mark Lamarty, Head of Customer Education at Astronomer, best-selling instructor on Udemy. And if you don't want to miss anything about Airflow, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. That will help me a lot. And smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. 4 years ago, I did a video about writing your first data pipeline as a beginner in Airflow. And if you remember, or if you didn't watch that video, you had to create a data pipeline, the following one, with different tasks and so on. Today, it is time to make an update on that video and see how to write the same data pipeline with the newest features of Airflow 3.0 and pretty much being up to date with the latest best practices. So without further ado, let me show you what you are going to create. This is the data pipeline that you will create. So as you can see, you have 3 tasks, training model A, B, and C. And as we are not going to train a real machine learning model, you will return fake accuracies. For example, training model A returns 1, and then B 2, and then C 3. Next, you have choose best model that allows you to run one task or another according to a condition. So for example, the condition here could be if a training model has, let's say, an accuracy greater or equal to 3, then you want to run accurate. Otherwise, you want to run inaccurate. And so just with that simple data pipeline, you will learn a ton of interesting features in Airflow 3.0. For example, how do you dynamically generate tasks? How do you share data between your tasks? How do you pick one task or another according to a condition? And more importantly, how do you schedule your first DAG in Airflow? But before jumping into the code, you have to know some basics. Let's get into them. The first and maybe the most important concept in Airflow is the concept of DAG. A DAG means directed acyclic graph. It is a graph with nodes corresponding to your tasks and directed edges corresponding to the dependencies between your tasks. And also, there is no cycle in a DAG. So for example, this is a DAG. You have the nodes T1, T2, T3, T4 corresponding to the tasks of your data pipeline. You have the directed edges, the dependencies between your tasks. You know that T2, T3, T4 depend on T1, and you don't have any cycle. For example, this is not a DAG. Why? Because you have a cycle. You can see here that T2 depends on T1, but T1 depends also on T2. To sum up, a DAG is a data pipeline, it is a workflow, and it has tasks and dependencies. Now, if we zoom in a little bit on the tasks, well, you define a task by using an operator in Airflow. You can think of an operator as a predefined template that defines the logic of a specific task in your DAG. Okay, it's like an abstraction of what you want to do. So for example, here you have multiple tasks. Let's say in T2 you want to execute a Python function, then in T3 you want to execute a bash command, and maybe in T4 you want to insert data in a database. Well, in order to do that, you will use operators and different operators. For example, to execute a Python function, you can use the Python operator. To execute a bash command, you can use the bash operator. And to insert data into a database, you can use the SQL execute query operator. So keep in mind, Airflow has many operators, many predefined templates so that you don't have to rewrite the logic each time you want to do something with a tool or a service. You will save a lot of time. So keep in mind that an operator abstracts the logic that you want to run, and each time you add an operator to your DAG, you are actually creating a new task in your DAG. So now you know the basics, it is time to jump into the code. To set up and run Airflow locally, I highly recommend you to use Docker, and more specifically, use the Docker Compose file for Airflow that you can find right here. As soon as you have downloaded the Docker Compose file on your computer, you can open your code editor where the file is, and then run the following command, docker compose up-d, in order to run your Airflow instance in local. And then after that, you will end up with some folders that you can see on the left. The first folder, config, has the Airflow configuration file, airflow.cfg. Then under that folder, you have the DAGs folder, which is maybe the most important one as it is where you will put your DAGs. the files corresponding to your DAGs. Then you have the logs folder if you want to check the logs of your tasks. And then last but not least, you have the plugins folder if you want to customize your Airflow instance. But this is way more advanced. So here we're going to focus on the DAGs folder. When you want to create a data pipeline in Airflow, the first step is to create a Python file in the DAGs folder. So here, let's create that Python file that we can call mydag.py. Then the next step, and what you will always do, is to import the DAG decorator. So from airflow.sdk, you import the DAG decorator. And the DAG decorator will be used to define your DAG, your data pipeline in that file. So once you have that, in order to define your DAG, it's pretty simple. You just need to use @ and then DAG. And then you can define the Python function mydag with nothing in it for now. And then at the end, you call mydag. And just like that, you have successfully defined your first data pipeline, your first DAG with no tasks for now in Airflow. So what I want you to remember here is that the name of the Python function, so this mydag, is the unique identifier of your DAG. So each time you create a DAG, make sure that the name of your DAG is always unique, okay? You can change the name if you don't want to use the name as defined in the function by adding that parameter to the DAG decorator, which is DAG ID, and then you give the name that you want. So for example, another name, okay? You can do that. But by default, as you are using the DAG decorator, you don't have to, you can remove that parameter, and the name of the function will be the unique identifier of your DAG. Now we want to create the first 3 tasks in our DAG, training model A, B, and C. How to do that? Well, in this case, we will use the task decorator. And the task decorator allows you to execute a Python function. So for example, you can remove pass, and let's implement training model A. And so for that, you use the task decorator, and then you define the Python function that you want to run under that decorator. So here, training model A, that returns a fake accuracy. So let's say 1. And that's it. Just like that, you have created a task in your DAG. That task will be called training model A, and it will run what you have in the Python function. So here it returns 1. Then we can create a second task, training model B, that returns 2. And finally, training model C, that returns 3. And now you have created 3 tasks. At this point, we have successfully created our first tasks, training model A, B, and C, and we know that to run a Python function, we can use the task decorator. Now it is time to see how to create choose best model in order to choose one task or another according to a condition. For that, you will use the branch Python operator that allows you to execute a Python function that has the condition. And here we want to say if a given accuracy is above a given threshold, then we want to execute one task. And if it is below, then we want to execute another task. To use the branch Python operator, it is pretty simple. You just need, after training model C, to use the task decorator and then dot branch. And then under that decorator, you define the Python function with the condition. So here, let's say choose best model, okay? And as it is a branching operator, you have to return the task ID of the next task you want to execute. Keep in mind that each time you create a task in your DAG, that task has a unique identifier, the task ID. And here, as you are using the task decorator, the unique identifier of your task, let's say for this one, it is training model A. Same thing here, it is training model B, then training model C, and here choose best model. Like for the DAG, you can change that if you want, just by using the parameter task ID in the task decorator, and then you define the unique identifier of your task that you want here. So let's say training model X, okay? But again, as we are using the task decorator, we don't have to do that. We can just use the Python function that we define just under it. So now back to the branching here, we can define the condition. So let's say if accuracy is greater than 2, then we want to execute the task that has the task ID accurate. Otherwise, we want to execute the task that has the task ID inaccurate. And that's it, okay? Just remember, whenever you want to choose one task or another, according to a condition, you will use a branch operator, here the branch Python operator, and that branch operator has to return the task ID of the next task you want to execute. Now we have choose best model, we still have to implement the next two tasks, accurate and inaccurate. And for that, I'm not going to use the Python operator, I'm going to use the bash operator to execute a bash command. But you could definitely use the Python operator if you want to. So to use the bash operator, it's pretty simple. We just need to use the task decorator again, but this time .bash. And then just under that decorator, we can define the Python function. So here accurate, because this is the task ID that we define here. And inaccurate, we just want to return this string, so echo and then accurate, which basically is a bash command in order to display accurate on the terminal. And we can do the same for inaccurate. So let's copy and paste this task right here, but this time it is inaccurate, and here we want to put inaccurate. And just like that, you have successfully created two tasks, but this time to execute bash commands. And here the bash command is to display accurate on the terminal or inaccurate. All right, so now we have successfully implemented all the tasks. It is time to check the Airflow UI. By default, you go on localhost 8080 and then the username is Airflow and the password is Airflow. Then you land on the Airflow homepage. You can go to the DAGs view, and by default, Airflow brings many DAG examples. That's why you have over 80 DAGs here. But let's search for our DAG, which is my DAG. And if you don't see it here, that means you maybe made a mistake in the code. Then click on my DAG, and it looks weird, right? Because we don't have any tasks here. Why? Well, let me show you that. Back to your code, as we use the task decorator, we have to explicitly call each task here. So just under the definition of your tasks, you can call training model A, and then training model B, then training model C, choose best model, accurate and inaccurate. Okay, exactly as you will do for any Python function. Then if you save the file and go back on the Airflow UI, this time you can see your tasks, but they are not exactly as you would like. I mean, you don't have any dependencies here. So the next question is, how do you define the dependencies between your tasks? Once you have created your tasks, how do you define the order in which you want to execute them? Well, it is pretty simple. In Airflow, you have the bit shift operators. So concretely, as you want to execute training model A, B, and C at the same time, you can put them in a list. So here you create a list, and then you put training model B, and then training model C in that list. And then you use the right bit shift operator, this one. Then you call choose best model, okay, like that. And finally, another list as you want to choose between accurate or inaccurate. So accurate here, and then inaccurate. And you can remove that. And just like that, you have successfully defined the dependencies between your tasks. In fact, if you save the file and go back on the Airflow UI, you can see that now training model A, B, and C will be executed. Then the task choose best model runs. And finally, either accurate or inaccurate will be executed. All right, so you have successfully implemented the tasks and the dependencies. What's next? Well, if you carefully take a look at the schedule of your DAG, you don't have any, which means that DAG runs only manually. Let's modify that. To define how often your DAG must run, you need to use the schedule parameter. So in the DAG decorator, you define the schedule, which takes a cron expression. So here, let's say at daily, which is behind the scene the current expression that corresponds to every day at midnight. So this DAG now runs every day at midnight. In addition to the schedule parameter, you can define a start date corresponding to the date at which your DAG starts being scheduled. So for example, here, let's say the start date, January 1st, 2025, and that start date takes a datetime object, so you have to import the datetime object right here. And so now you are saying that this DAG must run from January 1st, 2025, every day at midnight. Okay, now there is one last thing before running this DAG. So if you carefully take a look at the choose best model task, we have a warning for accuracy because we haven't defined accuracy anywhere else in the DAG. So what can we do here? Well, remember that the accuracies come from the training model tasks. So training model A, B, and C. So in fact, we are not going to have only one accuracy, but multiple accuracies. And we want to make sure that one of those accuracies is above 2. So for that, we can define a parameter to the choose best model task. So let's say accuracies, which is going to be a list of integers corresponding to 1, 2, and 3. And then here the condition will be if max accuracies, so let's say here 3 because it is max, is greater than 2, then we want to execute accurate, otherwise we want to execute inaccurate. Okay? So once we have that, we need to modify the dependencies. Let's create a variable here, accuracies, and then we want to pass the variable accuracies as a parameter of choose best model, and we keep the dependency with accurate and inaccurate, as we still want to choose between accurate or inaccurate according to the accuracies. And that's it. Just like that, you have successfully defined the dependencies and you are sharing data between the training model tasks and the choose best model task. So let's see if that works on the Airflow UI. If you trigger the DAG and then wait for the run to complete, so as you can see here, it is running, then click on the run, you can see that all the tasks have been successfully executed, and more importantly, because we have one of the accuracies greater than 2, then accurate has been executed, whereas inaccurate has been skipped. So congratulations, you have successfully created your first data pipeline in Airflow, and you know how to create your first tasks, how to schedule a data pipeline, how to share data between your tasks, how to define dependencies between your tasks, and how to pick one task or another according to a condition. All of that with this simple data pipeline. Okay, there is one last bonus that I would like to show you. I don't know about you, but I don't like writing the same thing multiple times. And here, if you take a look at the training model tasks, they are pretty similar, right? I mean, the only thing that changed is what we return. So how can we generate those 3 tasks in a smarter way? Well, pretty easy. So let's create a task that we're going to call training model X, or actually just training model, that takes a parameter, and that parameter will be accuracy, just for the example. And we just want to return this value. Okay, so accuracy. Then we can remove those 3 tasks. And then in the dependencies, we remove all of that. And we call training model, then dot expand accuracy equals to the list 1, 2, and 3. And because we are calling training model with the method expand, we are going to generate one training model task for every accuracy that we have in this list. So one training model task for the value 1, another one for the value 2, and another one for the value 3. And so that's how you can generate tasks dynamically with Airflow by using expand. And the parameter that you want to map with a list of values. So if you save the file and go back on the Airflow UI, you can see that this time you have training model and a pair of square brackets. If you trigger your DAG and wait for the run to complete, you can see that 3 tasks have been generated as expected, corresponding to 1, 2, and 3. If you try to add another value to your list, you will end up with for training model tasks. Alright, so that's it for this video. I truly hope you enjoyed it. Keep in mind, this is just the beginning. You can do so much more in Airflow. If you want to learn more about it, I have a couple of courses on Udemy. And otherwise, I see you for our next video. Take care.